a sixth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the sunlight of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area that might be called the Twilight Zone.
There is a fifth dimension, beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone.
You are about to enter another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind, a journey into a wondrous land of imagination. Next stop, the Twilight Zone. You're traveling through another dimension, a dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. That's the signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone. You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. A journey into a wondrous land whose boundaries are that of imagination. Your next stop, the Twilight Zone. You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. That is the Twilight Zone. And this is Will. This is your sci-fi guy. This is your science fiction Will. And this is the Twilight Zone. The stars of the Twilight Zone. Some of the best. Some of the most memorable and beloved. And that's what we're going to be going into. We're going to be entering the zone to find the stars. So now I know a lot of you fellow zonies, a lot of you fellow Twilight Zone fans will say, but wait a minute, Will, there's too many. There's so many stars in classic Twilight Zone, and that's true. Absolutely true. Oh, and mind you, talking about the classic Twilight Zone, of course. The Rod Serling run from 1959 to 1964. There was the 80s version, I guess a 2000s version, and now a current version on Paramount Plus, but we're going to be talking the stars of classic Twilight Zone, beginning in 1959. So again, we have so many, we have dozens, right? We have Baker's dozens and regular dozens, dirty dozens, so to speak. We have William Shatner, who would go on to become Captain Kirk himself. We have Burgess Meredith, who would go on to become Rock, come on, Rock. Rocky Balboa's trainer, okay? We've got Martin Balsam, Martin Landau. You got two Martins, Martin Balsam and Martin Landau. We have Mickey Rooney. So, we could go on and on, but for tonight, for this podcast, Maybe we'll extend it in the future. Maybe we'll do another one. But for our purposes tonight, we're going to be doing Robert Redford, Carol Burnett, and Mr. Jack Klugman. That's right. Three of probably the most famous, certainly most maybe beloved actors of film and television, and certainly of Twilight Zone. And what's notable is that Jack Klugman appeared in 4 Twilight Zone episodes. Robert Redford and Carol Burnett in each, one. They appeared in 1 each. So Klugman kind of holds the record, and I think Burgess Meredith is the other in terms of how many episodes. Each 4 episodes. So Mr. Klugman, you're one of the record holders with Burgess Meredith. So why Twilight Zone, you might ask? Come on, Will, it's an old show. Get into the now. Stop living in the past. One of my favorites, of course, with Billy Mooney, is It's a Good Life, right? With the great Anthony, the great powers that wish people into the cornfield, and you could say, oh, well, it's a good life, Will. Live it now. Get yourself out of the past. Well, you know what? I don't want to get out of it. I want to live in the past. I want to live in the Twilight Zone. I think I really do. If I had any choice of anywhere to live, well, it might be on the Enterprise too. I'm trying to think which one. Well, the Enterprise D is certainly the luxury liner, the cruise ship, the love boat of the Starfleet vessels. The Defiant is the Kick-Ass. And then, of course, the original series is quaint in many ways, but still very livable. But I digress. But if I had another option, maybe I'd want to live in the Twilight Zone. Because then I could pick any episode, and maybe I would pick It's a Good Life and try to beat Anthony to the ground. Anyway, the bottom line to all of this is that the Twilight Zone is just, it's so influential. It's so influential to me. It's so, reminiscent. It's so nostalgic, certainly, and it's so impacted my life as a sci-fi fantasy horror fan, as a writer. There's so many, moments in one's life that you look on, certainly as sort of that landmark, that sort of transition. And as a kid, when I would put on TV, we were lucky we had a lot of, sort of marathons, and they would run the Twilight Zone a lot late at night, or sometimes late evening on Saturdays. It'd be maybe, I think, 7 or so o'clock, and then 11 o'clock and later. But, lucky enough to find that show to be very instrumental and very influential, and just, impacting your life as a kid, as a fan, as a growing, absorber of this, material, these ideas, like in the opener of Things and Ideas, and these ideas just, explode in your mind as a kid, as a teen, and, later on. And I remember even in college talking to so many people. They love the Twilight Zone. I mean, I don't think I've ever met anyone who doesn't either outright love it or at least respects and likes and has watched it. And it's very few shows. Maybe Star Trek. Maybe I Love Lucy. Honeymooners, Mission Impossible. There's certain shows that everyone has sort of a reverence for, a respect, or certainly an outright love. So this past New Year's Day, we're into the new, 2023. Sounds so spacey, right? It sounds so Jetsony and the science fiction-y. 2023. And my buddy, Eddie Stake, and I, we were discussing, we were just talking about stuff and shooting the shit, and we talked about the Twilight Zone. Why? Because he was enjoying the marathon, and he reminded me of it. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to be watching with you. So I kind of started watching. We traded sort of messages back and forth, and we were talking about it. And then I was like, let me watch some of the, the ones, because I own the series on digital, so I was watching some of the series. the episodes, and one of my favorites, of course, is a William Shatner episode, is Nick of Time, with the couple in the diner, and they can't seem to get away from that, devilish mystic seer. And no matter what they do for a while, it's, the wife is like, what are you, crazy? And what are you doing? Let's leave. Let's get out of here. It's funny, after so many episodes, watching these over and over, it's still a wonderful episode, but it's so interesting how he just kind of changes. She's like, let's go. And he's like, okay. And there's no sort of, big protracted sort of battle. But of course it is a 25-minute show or so, less than a half an hour with commercials. But of course it addresses that whole, addiction, superstition ruling one's life. But that's how I got the idea to do the, several stars. I mean, we could go again. Oh, so many we could go over. They're either all household names in some way, or really respected, character actors, or in the case of Redford and Burnett and Klugman, superstars, true household names and superstars. Now, Jack Klugman, tying for most episodes for a Twilight Zone actor with Burgess Meredith, he did 4, and Burgess did 4 as well. His episodes, A Game of Pool, In Praise of Pip, Passage for Trumpet, these are really looked upon as, the more sort of known or favored, but the great one also, that is the Hour episode. It's an hour-long episode from the 4th season. It's called Death Ship. And it's really a disturbing one. The others are great. Certainly A Game of Pool with Jonathan Winters and, really well done. That's probably maybe my favorite in ways, but Death Ship certainly is just a really disturbing sci-fi horror. Synopsis here is an episode of the Twilight Zone based on a short story by Richard Matheson. It was inspired by the legend of the Flying Dutchman. In this episode, a spaceship crew discovers a wrecked replica of their ship with their own dead bodies inside. So you've got this sort of, time looping, time warping premise. And, Klugman plays the captain of this starship, this spaceship, and they find their own bodies. So, you've seen this before if you're a Star Trek fan, a science fiction fan, certainly. But Twilight Zone, back in, this was 63, I guess, the 4th season. You're talking about a really, sort of early example of this sort of time warpy, time traveling, time loop kind of episode. So Death Ship with Klugman is excellent. All his others are great, but that one in many ways, because when I was a kid, certainly they never put them on the hour episodes. You had to watch them much later in special sort of, marathon runs, and then they started playing the 1 hour episodes. And now we go to Robert Redford. What else can you say about truly a legend of cinema? One of the true sort of silver screen greats. And one of his early roles is in The Twilight Zone. This is the episode Nothing in the Dark. This is one of 2 episodes that were filmed during season 2, but then held over for broadcast until season 3. Now, I'm also, Mr. No Spoiler, so I never like to spoil something. So this is one of the great twists of The Twilight Zone, and you just gotta watch. One really interesting thing is Redford does, of course, a lot of film festival, with Sundance being the most prominent. In 2014, at the International Film Festival in Santa Barbara, he was told by the production company of the series that it is the most often viewed episode of The Twilight Zone. So it's, one of the more favorites, one of the most popular, and certainly one of the most viewed. And I have to say, it still, is so powerful. When you finally see this, again, it's about an old woman who's sort of a recluse, and she comes in contact with Robert Redford, and there's a big twist. That's all I'm going to say. You're going to have to, watch for yourself, but it certainly is such a prime example of the power of the Twilight Zone. The emotional power, the cinematic and thematic. One of the things that Serling, this is a great interview, you can look it up on YouTube. I believe, Mike Wallace, I guess it was right when the show was beginning to be produced, in the first season of Zone. And Wallace had him on his show, and he said, so why should we bother or care about the show? And Serling is like, we're trying to make, mini movies. We're trying to make little half-an-hour movies as cinematic, as theatrical as possible. And obviously they succeeded. So Nothing in the Dark, Robert Redford's episode. So now we come to Carol Burnett. And, it's talking about influential things in your life, talking about these, things that impact, that carry over to adulthood from childhood. And the Carol Burnett show is like, I just heard me laugh there. There is such a fondness and such a chuckle-filled, emotional time whenever I see Carol Burnett, Vicki Lawrence, Harvey Korman, Tim Conway. I mean, it's hard to name, a better ensemble or show. I mean, Saturday Night Live is so indebted. All the cast members, producers say, without Carol, we probably would never be. It's, it's the landmark of the sort of variety comedy show. And obviously Carol Burnett is an American legend, an American treasure. And again, one of the early roles we had as a Twilight Zone fan was Carol Burnett. This episode is Cavender is Coming, and it was originally broadcast in 1962. It's a very sort of silly, I wouldn't say, and I think Eddie and I were kind of agreeing when we talked about it, it's not a great episode, but Carol Burnett's so good in it. She's good in everything. She doesn't hit a false note in pretty much anything she does. So just to see it for her, and the episode's pretty good. It's fun, it's silly, and it's sort of enjoyable in that zone-ish way. But certainly, Ms. Burnett is just pretty much shines. She is Sterling in Serling's show. It said this is some notes. It was originally broadcast with a laugh track, so the only Twilight Zone episode to feature one. And then it was intended, this is really fun, it was intended as a backdoor pilot for a regular comedy series featuring the Cavender character. The version included in the Twilight Zone, the complete definitive collection DVD, has the laugh track. Wow, removed. All right. Reruns airing in the U.S. on Sci-Fi and MeTV also have the laugh track removed, as does the version on Netflix. Yeah. It's just because even, again, as a kid, I don't remember it much. Not that I don't know if it's that they didn't, play it much, or I never saw it. So yeah, having that laugh track in the beginning, and then, it being removed from the DVDs and the subsequent airings. So who knows if the backdoor pilot was successful and Carol Burnett could have had another, show before the Carol Burnett show. Was the character strong enough? Probably. Well, certainly she would have made it, as strong, because she always does such a great job. It says, this is great, bears a strong similarity to the first season episode, Mr. Beavis. Both episodes are comedies about guardian angels who try to help kind-hearted but hapless human beings by giving them everything they think they desire, only to discover that the humans are happier with the way their life had been previously. Both episodes were written by Rod Serling. So, again, not a masterwork of an episode, but certainly because of the great Carol Burnett, it is worth watching. So go watch Twilight Zone. If you're like me, you've got the episodes, you can have a marathon every night, and I might just do that this evening and just play a bunch. Maybe I'll play every one we talked about tonight, because there's certainly goodies. And if you're subscribing to Sci-Fi Guy, we've got some goodies as well. We always do, and they're always free. But then, if you'd like to support us, and certainly that is welcome, you can $4.99 every month, and you get exclusives, you get interviews, and you get goodies that the freebies do not get. So it's an incentive, my friends, right? It's certainly an attraction, but either way, keep on subscribing. Message us, feedback us, as I can say. Keep feedbacking, keep sending in that, those comments, and, go watch Twilight Zone, and we'll see you soon.